welcome to Turn the Page, the official podcast of the Syosset Public Library.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Turn the Page. I'm your host today, Jen, and today I am joined by a comics creator who has made something that is absolutely delightful. This is a graphic novel that has, like a Pokemon, experienced many evolutions. It's taken many forms to get to where we are today, and they've all been so beautiful. So welcome to the show. Could I ask you to introduce yourself and your book, please?
Yeah, hey, thank you so much for having me. My name is Toril. I'm an artist living in the Bay Area in California, and my first book, HOTBLOOD, is about a centaur in the Old West. So it's a fantasy historical fiction Western.
It's so beautiful. It is a gorgeous, gorgeous book. And I'd love if you could tell us a little bit about how you got into comics and the origins of Hot Blood. I referenced its evolutions and it's moved from the web to print. So can you tell us a little bit about, where it all came from?
Yeah, totally. So it goes way back. I grew up reading webcomics, like probably starting in middle school. I was reading stuff like Dro Tales and Elijah in a Zoo on drunkduck.com and a lot of independent stuff. I always wanted to make a webcomic because I thought those people, like, the creators were just like the coolest people imaginable, and they like really inspired me. I always wanted to make a webcomic. I started developing Hot Blood in my junior year of college. It was just a random idea that I had, and I was like sort of surprised that no one else had really thought about it. Like obviously there are other comics about centaurs, but there were no Westerns. And I was like, but that like it's a Western. There's got to be horses, right? I had the game industry job that I had lined up after graduation fell through due to layoffs. So I ended up working at a cafe to support myself. And that's when I started posting the comic on Tumblr. During this time, I was living in Boston. And so I was also tabling at like a ton of conventions with my roommates and running an online shop. And I had a Patreon. And eventually I ended up doing 2 Kickstarters, which were both like really successful, to print copies of the book. And that was all great. But after 5 years of that, I was pretty burned out. So I actually stopped drawing for 2 years when I started working at the publishing company. But that job is actually also where I met my agent, and she was a fan of Hot Blood. So of course, when the first pitch I gave her didn't sell, she asked if I'd consider returning to the story. And I was like, oh my God, really? Like, are you sure? And she was like, yeah, come on. So at first we were just going to do a sequel, and which will now be volume 3 in the series that I'm working on. But Mad Cave, my publisher, wanted to buy the webcomic as well. And I was like, yeah, sure, but the art's 10 years old, so just give me a minute to redraw it. And that took 13 or 14 months.
Wow, that is so interesting. What was it like redrawing it? Did you notice big differences in your style over time, or just returning to your own work like that? What did you see about your own development as an artist?
Yeah, so it was awesome. I feel like you see a lot of like advice floating around the internet that's like never redraw, like just keep going, like never go back, never redraw your comic, like blah 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 blah. And like, okay, to a point that's true. Like it's really, there's no catch-all for anything, but I really enjoyed it. I think if you want to, you should absolutely redraw your comic. I found it incredibly rewarding. I feel like I had been struggling a lot to find a style for what will be the sequel now, but when I went back and just started redrawing the old art, like, and I was trying also to like kind of work in a way that was like going to be really fast and really easy. I like to work in like the easiest way possible. I don't like making things difficult really for myself. I like it to be like fun, which is the most important thing, right? Like if you're not having fun, what the hell are you doing? It's comics. Like, yeah, so redrawing it, I just everything came together in a way that felt like really natural. I felt like I was developing a visual language that made a lot of sense and was like helping me to communicate the things that I wanted to say. And that was just, again, like really fun, really rewarding. Like I worked really, really hard on it as well, which like I had never really tried to make anything good before, which sounds annoying, but I think part of why I'm able to do what I do is that I design projects that are like possible to complete. So like, I'm pretty good at kind of maintaining a scope, right? And that means that the project is not necessarily like incredibly ambitious, but this was the first time where I wanted to be ambitious and I wanted to do like the very best that I could do. And I think it really paid off.
Nice. Yeah, absolutely. Um, so tell us a little bit about Evander Rook and Asa Langley. I'd love to know what went into their characters and shaping their dynamic and the tension between them.
That's an interesting question. Gosh, I mean, I don't think they've ever had sex sober.
Yeah, no, I don't think so.
I don't think that's the case. I read a lot of yaoi. I'm really interested in human relationships. Well, I'm very interested in shame. I don't really care about alternate histories where like racism or sexism and homophobia have been like conveniently erased to appeal to modern audiences. I don't think that's real, like quote unquote representation, if we're going to use that word. At worst, it ends up being kind of color by numbers. So when I think about my characters, I think about like, they're not real, obviously. Like this is fantasy. There are centaurs, there's magic, but they're living in America. They're living in past that shares a lot of commonalities with our past. It's not very different. In some ways, it's worse. In some ways, it's better. There's a lot of world building that really doesn't make its way into the narrative. It's just there as kind of like background radiation. What's really important to me is like, okay, so how are these people surviving in America, right? Like that's really the core question.
The tension between them, like there's a lot of different stuff going on, obviously, and it's not just all about like being, different species partially. There's like class and there's like, station in life and all these different things going on. What is your approach to tension? And that can mean like, heavily like romantic tension, if we want to call it, or just like conflict tension.
Well, I love conflict. Yeah, I don't really like cozy fantasy. Like, as for the tension in their relationship, I guess, I mean, it's like anything, right? Like, it's based on things that I've experienced. It's based on, the reality of my day-to-day life and the day-to-day life of, I think, everybody. Unless you really just live in a bubble, you're going to run into people who are different from you. You're going to, experience conflict in your family life, in your personal relationships, in your work life. And again, like I'm just very nosy. I think those things are very interesting. I love gossip. And I also, think that when you're writing a relationship, I don't think there's any story if everything just works. I guess that's where I'm coming from.
Yeah, that makes sense. There's a lot like causing that tension that's like both sort of internal to them as people and like outer stuff getting in the way, to speak really broadly. I have another question that's about genre and world building that you mentioned before. You open with a Cormac McCarthy quote, and I'm curious about like what genre tropes and expectations were you the most excited to engage with, whether that's by like fulfilling them or subverting them?
So Hot Blood is a Western, but there actually aren't any cowboys. Seriously though, I think I really want to make people sad and uncomfortable, and I want them to think about what it means to live in the United States. I love tragedies. I love McCarthy's juxtaposition of genocide with the sublime. Two of my favorite movies are Brokeback Mountain and Hidalgo. I'm not really trying to subvert anything. I love Westerns like this. There is not an ounce of irony in this book. I just think horses are neat. That's really where we're coming from.
They are neat, yeah. And you do engage a lot with industrialization and sort of like settlerism. I'm curious about like if there was research that you did, even just like in the visual sense, like were there films or landscapes or what have you that you were particularly excited to draw on for your project?
So this is a benefit of having been working on this ultimately for over a decade. I've been able to build on a lot of choices that when I made them at the time were arbitrary, and then I've ended up developing them and they've become like really core themes and kind of pillars of the narrative, so to speak. So at first the setting, of course, was arbitrary. I wanted to do a Western, and I was like, well, late 19th century, that makes sense, right? And then, I started researching everything that was happening at that time, which was all stuff that I hadn't, really thought about since high school. And I was like, oh my God, it's so fucking ugly. I'm really interested in logistics and technology. Recently, I've been reading about stuff like the AI bubble and the history of water rights in California. Like, I just think that's fascinating. It is so fucked up. I'm also interested in natural and industrial disasters, and I also really like to drive. So I've spent a lot of time taking road trips around the country. I've been up and down the West Coast to the Mojave, Utah, Colorado, Idaho. I really love the landscape of this continent. And when you visit these places, you learn things that you would never find online. You learn what it feels like to be there. And that to me is I think that's my favorite part of having worked, having decided that this is like what my subject matter is going to be, it's the fact that it's having the excuse to write off all this stuff on my taxes.
That's true. That's a great perk. I'm interested in that, like, capturing that feeling of being somewhere. Does color play a role in that for you? Because this is a full color book, but you do use limited palettes in different places for different reason. How is like your color palette shaped by your storytelling goals?
So I love Oppenheimer, the Chris Nolan film. I really like the way it's constructed. I thought it was very effective because when you remember something, it's not linear. The memories kind of superimpose themselves. Everything is happening at the same time, right? And so I wanted to do the same thing. A comic is not a picture book. The drawings don't have to literally illustrate the text. They can contradict each other. Rook is already an unreliable narrator, and we're experiencing his intrusive thoughts kind of throughout the book. There's no such thing as a true objective memory. And that's why I wanted to use color as a leitmotif to emphasize that without making it like so incredibly obvious. It's like, okay, it's black and white, so that means it's a flashback. And, there are flashbacks that are full color. There are these panels that are kind of a red on black. I was thinking about Greek pottery because, of course, he's a centaur. But I was also really inspired by Hilary Mantel's use of color in her writing. I really love Wolf Hall, especially the way that she uses the color red throughout the story to symbolize different things.
Yeah, it's really beautiful, and I am very excited to see where this goes. I didn't know there was a volume 3 in the works until we started talking. So, when do we get to see that? Is there a date yet, or are you still sort of in the early days, or?
Well, right now, so I'm busy with marketing stuff for volume 1, like this podcast. I'm also working on volume 2 right now, which is a rewrite of my webcomic Zarko. That's due to pre-press in February. The final draft of the script for volume 3 is due in November. And then I also have a full-time day job in operations at Viz Media, the manga publisher. So I've got a lot of irons in the fire.
Yeah, that's a lot of stuff.
So theoretically, we want to release a book a year for the next 4 years.
Nice. Cool. Well, I'm very excited to see 2 and 3. Thank you so much for taking the time from your extremely busy schedule to have this chat with us. Well, listeners, please check out Hot Blood, Volume 1, The Land of Promise. It is absolutely beautiful. And I think, it's still late August, but we're approaching the time that you want to start thinking about your holiday gifts. If you have a Western-loving, centaur-loving friend or family member in your life, pick this one up. It'll really, really, really be a hit. Okay, it's time to close this chapter. We'll see you next time.
It's time to close this chapter of Turn the Page. Join us for the next episode.